Hi there. Today I thought I'd do a quick comparison between two conditions that, on the face of it, look very similar. Namely the selection historic relative odds and the selection relative odds. Although they look much the same, you would use them under different circumstances. So let's first of all concentrate on the selection historic relative odds. So on the left hand side you see the settings for this particular condition. Now this condition allows you to compare the odds at the current time with the odds sometime earlier. So like every other condition, you need to specify a selection. So I'll just leave it set to Betfair row number 1, so we'll be looking at the favourite, although theoretically you could check the odds of a runner now compared to the value of odds for a completely different runner 10 minutes ago. I'm not sure there's a great deal of value in that, but I'm sure someone might find a strategy that would be useful. So you would specify your selection, so we're going to concentrate on the favourite for this particular race. And we're going to compare the selection A's back price. So we're going to look at the favourite's back price as it is now. In other words, when the rule executes. And we're going to see and compare it with its back price some time ago. So for example, if I change that to, let's say, 10 minutes, we can pop that in like so. Now what you have to do, however, is the direct comparison is made with these selection relative odds type conditions, is made with the adjusted price. So what we do here is, let's say I wanted to check to see if selection A, the favourite, its price now is, let's say, 20 ticks lower than it was 10 minutes ago. So what we would do is set this condition here is less than its condition 10 minutes ago minus 20 ticks. So that's the adjusted price based on its value 10 minutes ago. So in other words, because this setting here is only just a direct comparison, less than or less than and equal to and so on, it doesn't say less than by 20 ticks. So you have to make that adjustment within this part here. So you create what is effectively an adjusted odds and then make the direct comparison. So we're looking at the odds 10 minutes ago minus 20 ticks and then comparing the odds now with that adjusted figure. And that's essentially how you do it. You can probably guess from here as well that because you've got the same controls there and there, you could reverse that and choose that now, and that is 10 minutes ago. But you'd obviously need to adjust the settings in here or in there. I tend to just use the one way all the time just to keep everything consistent, and it might be something that you want to consider as well. And that's all there is to it as far as setting up a mechanism that checks the historical odds of a runner. Now clearly from here you can see that you can set up this to look back in time quite some way if you desire. However, there's one very important thing you must be aware of if you're using the selection historic relative odds technique, and that is you must open the market well in advance. So if you're looking an hour back, you must open the market at least an hour before now. Okay, so if you're doing that now check, let's say at the scheduled off time, you must open the market an hour beforehand, or at the very least assign this strategy to your market and put the market in the market watch list at least an hour before the start of the race. If you don't do that, Fairbot doesn't know the odds an hour before, assuming that you're going to be doing it for an hour. In our case, we're doing it for 10 minutes, so you need to make sure this market is open 10 minutes ago, or at the very least assign it to the watch list at least 10 minutes before the scheduled off time. In addition to that, you need to make sure that the start refreshing a market is adjusted accordingly. So although I've got it set for a minute there, you'd need to go in there and change that to do it at least 10 minutes beforehand. Otherwise, Fairbot cannot assess what the odds were 10 minutes before. So that's the important thing you must be aware of. So if you're doing anything in a relatively slow moving market, you may find that you need to open up a number of markets quite some time before those markets are due to start. But that's perhaps the most important one in order to get the accurate readings that you require. But that's all there is to it. Very simple settings. Choose your selections. Generally speaking, with this particular condition, you're going to use the same selection. And then specify what it is you want to check against an adjusted version of the same thing a certain amount of time ago. Now compare that with the selection relative odds. That allows you to check the odds as a snapshot when the rule executes. There's no backward checking, as it were. And so you generally use this to check the difference between two runners. So you'll see here we've got, at the moment I'm checking the favourite and the second favourite. And you do the settings the same as before. Just pop in the settings that you want, the difference between the two that you want to check. And that's it. So that's a much easier one to use. There's no requirement in terms of having to load the market up into the watch list well in advance. The check is done there and then. So there's two subtly different reasons that you would use these two different conditions. So generally speaking, with the selection relative odds one, you're comparing the odds between two different runners, whereas with the historical relative odds, you would generally use that to compare the odds of the same runner at different times. And that's essentially the functional difference between these two conditions. However, there is one caveat to that. You can use the selection relative odds to do a similar thing to the historical relative odds under one condition. And this is the condition I'm using, or the way I'm using it, with the Dutching of the quick starters videos that you may have seen in recent weeks. And that is, I am comparing the best back odds when this rule kicks in with the actual SP. So we know when the actual SP is calculated. It's calculated immediately at the start. So we can set this rule up to begin, let's say, 20 seconds after the race turns in play. So essentially we can simulate the selection historical odds mechanism in this particular situation. So we've got, in this case, a little 20-second window from the start of the race to when the rule kicks in, at which point it will check the odds of the favourite. I should change that back to the favourite, with the odds or the actual SP of the favourite at the start of the race 20 seconds ago. So based on these settings here, it's going to check if the favourite has dropped 20 ticks in the first 20 seconds of the race. So there's that little caveat. You don't need to add this into the watch list in advance and so on. And that gives you the same type of thing as the historical relative odds. But generally speaking, the selection relative odds is used as a quick snapshot at that particular point in time to compare odds between two different runners. Anyway, that's the fundamental difference between the two. Keep in mind the important one with the historical relative odds, you need to put that into, at the very least, put it into the watch list in advance and set the refreshing a market setting early enough to make sure that the first odds can be found by Fairbot. Okay guys, thanks very much. I'll speak to you in the next one. Cheers.